Welcome back to DCB's weekly college football recap. All right, folks, it is that time of week again where we both recap the previous week of college football and look ahead to some games upcoming in the next week, which is week 7. Hard to believe we're nearly halfway through the college football season already, but here we are. And I've got a lot of takeaways from this past weekend. Actually, recording this a day later as to kind of digest things a little bit better after what was a little bit of a difficult Saturday for us betting wise, but a lot of takeaways from these games nonetheless, and some very important implications for the college football playoff. It is that time of year where we start to get more and more weekday action. We're going to have some #Maction starting up here in the next couple of weeks, and Conference USA continues to start their games earlier and earlier throughout the week as well. But this week was the last one where we just had one game on Thursday, a couple on Friday, and mostly Saturday. So get ready to start adjusting your schedules if you're interested in those lower level college football games. You will have something to watch often on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights moving forward. But for this game on Thursday, they probably could have given us a bit of a better matchup than this one. New Mexico State hosting Sam Houston in what was really a battle of bottom feeders in Conference USA. I actually had Sam Houston still slightly graded higher than New Mexico State coming into this game, even with their 0-4 record, but they really showed that they are probably the worst team in the country, if not one of the bottom 3. Sam Houston falls to 0-5 here, dropping this one 37-10. I guess you could say it was competitive for a half, but things just started to unravel, especially in the fourth quarter. Friday, we had 5 games, and all of them featured a ton of points. So if you like offense, this was the slate for you. Not a ton of high-profile matchups here, but shootouts galore, especially in the Mountain West, where we had 2 of them, one between New Mexico and San Jose State. San Jose State has now bounced back a little bit these past couple of weeks. I had them projected to possibly contend for this conference in the preseason. Didn't look so hot out of the gates, dropping a tough home game to Central Michigan in week 1. But they put up 35 points in this one and win the game by 7. Impressive offensive display, which is something that they've really struggled with prior to this game so far this season. The other Mountain West shootout was San Diego State putting up 45 points against visiting Colorado State in a 21-point win. They've already shown that they can play very good defense. The past 2 weeks had only given up a combined 3 points to California and Northern Illinois. Now they get into conference play and they show that they can score a little bit as well. The Michigan transfer at quarterback, Jaden Denegal, actually looks better than expected. I hadn't seen much out of him at Michigan to expect him to have a great season, but they also ran the ball very effectively in this game and appear to be one of Boise State's top challengers in the Mountain West. Pretty much got what we expected out of the one major conference game on Friday night, which was West Virginia traveling to BYU. Always a really difficult place to play. To this point of the season, BYU's defense has really been their strength. They've been locking everybody down, but in this one, it was their offense that flourished. Bear Bachmeier, the freshman quarterback, appears to be getting more confident each week as he throws for over 350 yards in this game on just 18 completions. So BYU showing some real big play capability through the air in this game. Since there wasn't one standout headliner game on Saturday's slate, I'm going to choose to start with probably the most shocking result of the weekend as we go into the Saturday recap. Penn State loses outright as a 24.5-point favorite to UCLA, a team who hadn't even led in a game prior to this one against Penn State. Just an absolutely shocking result. Even in previous years where Penn State has had offensive struggles, you could always rely on their defense to show up in spots like this, and James Franklin had actually had a tremendous record against the spread against opponents not named Michigan and Ohio State, but this one was clearly a difficult spot for them to get up for after that brutal loss at home to Oregon in double overtime. probably never deserved to get that game to overtime in the first place, but clearly the team not able to rally and put up a better performance here against UCLA. I don't think they got more than one stop in this entire game. The Bruins and quarterback Nico Iamaleava really able to move up and down the field all game long, and Penn State was chasing from the very beginning. They were down 10-0 before you could blink. There was some absolutely terrible clock management on behalf of Penn State. And to make it all even worse, the guy calling plays for UCLA's offense, which is suddenly so dynamic against this Penn State defense, that was his first time ever calling plays in his life. So just really, once again, a stunning display by Penn State's coaching staff and a complete inability to prepare their team, even for a bottom feeder like UCLA. I'm not really sure what to make of this Bruins team. Obviously, they were always more talented than what they showed, especially against teams like UNLV and New Mexico. I always thought that the coaching was the biggest issue for them, so maybe now that they've made the change, they will take off. They do have a very interesting matchup against Michigan State this week that we'll talk a little bit more about later in the podcast. But to me, this has more to do with Penn State than it does UCLA. They've got big problems moving forward and a lot to correct very fast. Probably the headliner of the noon slate was Cincinnati beating number 14 Iowa State at home. Most would say this was an upset, although Cincinnati was actually a slight favorite in this game. I've been preaching that Iowa State is not as good as they've shown so far, and unfortunately, I backed off of that take this week. I should have stuck to my guns on that one, but Cincinnati did try to give this game away in the second half. They took a big early lead in this one on the strength of their offense. Iowa State really struggled to defend in this game. Both of their starting cornerbacks were injured in the week leading up to this one, so hard to adjust on the fly to as big of injuries as those two. Cincinnati absolutely took advantage, but they also really just ran the ball effectively throughout this game. Iowa State unable to match them in the trenches, which I think is the biggest red flag for them moving forward. They've been great at home, and they are still a very well-coached team, but clearly there is still a significant talent gap between Iowa State and the top of the Big 12. Another big game in the Big 12 at noon was Baylor holding off Kansas State by 1 point in what was a very controversial fourth quarter of this game. This was back and forth all day long, very entertaining game if you were able to watch, but Baylor pulls it out partially because of a play where Kansas State scored a touchdown to go up with about a minute to go, but the player had his helmet ripped off about 20 yards before he reached the end zone. The play was blown dead, and Kansas State was forced to settle for a field goal a few plays later. Baylor goes back down the field, only trailing by 2 points instead of 6, and they kick the game-winning field goal. So very controversial there for K-State. I saw their fans very angry online after this one, and perhaps deservedly so. Absolutely could have won this game. K-State drops to 2-4, and although they're looking improved with Dylan Edwards, the running back healthy, I think it's going to be too much to overcome to get back into the Big 12 race. Illinois was a team that I thought could be on potential upset alert against Purdue, and the Boilers offense did put up a good fight in this one, scoring 27 points. Unfortunately, their secondary appears to still be very far behind the rest of the Big Ten. When they needed to get a stop in this game, they just could not time and time again. I still feel like Purdue is an improved team compared to last year, but despite Barry Odom being a defensive coach first, he still has a lot of work to do to improve that side of the ball there at Purdue. They brought in over 80 new players this offseason, so it was always going to take some time to gel. I feel like they've done that very well on offense, and the defense showed some improvements in the first 2 weeks, but they've still got a long way to go. Sticking in the Big Ten, Michigan pulls out a low-scoring home win against Wisconsin. Offense definitely has some red flags going on right now with Michigan, especially on the offensive line. just got pushed around a lot throughout this game. Wisconsin's defensive line, I want to give them some credit, but I also feel like this is mostly due to some injuries that Michigan's got and just a lack of talent on that side of the line of scrimmage compared to previous years. I feel like a lot of other things are developing very well for Michigan's offense. Justice Haynes is arguably the best running back in the country right now. Jordan Marshall is obviously a solid backup as well. And Donovan McCulley has emerged as a true wide receiver one for this team. Bryce Underwood seems like he's getting more comfortable each week. They even found a second receiver who could possibly be reliable moving forward, and true freshman Andrew Marsh had 4 catches for 80 yards. Unfortunately, that offensive line is really the key to any offense's success. So Michigan only able to score 24 points in this game, and it was mostly because of that line just not being able to win in short yardage and keep drives going. So as I said, some credit to Wisconsin. They looked very solid in the trenches on both sides for most of this game. They started their third string quarterback in this one, Hunter Simmons. He had a decent day, but ultimately not enough production overall for this Wisconsin offense to put up enough points to compete in this game. They did go right down the field and score a touchdown on their opening possession, and then 3 points the rest of the game. So Michigan defense just clamps down and wins a tight, low-scoring game at home. Jumping over to the ACC, couple of notable blowouts. Clemson finally gets right with a road win over North Carolina, 38-10. They scored a touchdown on the very first play and really never looked back in this one. They took their foot off the gas in the second half, but led this one 35-3 at the break. North Carolina might be the worst team in all of the Power Four this season, so hard to give Clemson too much credit here. We know they have a ton of talent, but just hard to see this team continuing to improve that much given that it's all a bunch of mostly older, established players. So good win for Clemson, still not fully convinced by them moving forward. And another blowout in a game that I thought would actually be much closer. Pittsburgh finally shut up the noise about the past couple of weeks where they really blew both of those games against West Virginia and Louisville, had double-digit leads in both of those games. They made a quarterback switch in this one, benching Eli Holstein after 5 interceptions in 4 games, including 2 in the end zone. They decided to start freshman Mason Heinchel in this one, and he popped off, going for 323 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Pitt really able to do whatever they wanted in this one, even without their star running back, Desmond Reed. Boston College, it seemed like they had a very young, exciting quarterback in Dylan Lonergan early on in the season. He really struggled in this game. BC was unable to run the ball, and their defense got absolutely torched. So a lot of problems for Bill O'Brien to deal with going forward. Moving on to the afternoon slate, I would say the most notable result here was Florida knocking off number 9 Texas, going into the Swamp. I really thought that these two teams were very comparable. Looking at this game, as much as Texas was 3-1 and Florida was 1-3, that was mostly due to the difference in strength of schedule. And this was absolutely no fluke. Florida controlled this game really from start to finish. They had 34 minutes of time of possession to just under 26 minutes for Texas. They had more first downs, they had more total yardage, more pass yardage, more rush yardage. They were more efficient on third down. This was really a complete performance by Florida, and it could have been a bigger margin if they were able to complete a couple more of their drives rather than settle for field goals. I thought DJ Lagway looked much improved in this game. They clearly focused on getting the ball to their playmakers more. Jaden Baugh, the running back, came into this game averaging 5.9 yards per carry, but hadn't had more than 12 carries more than once in a game. They gave him 27 carries in this one against Texas for just over 100 yards and a touchdown. They also got their stud freshman receiver Dallas Wilson involved for the first time this season. 6 catches, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns for his first stats recorded this season. So a big breakout for the receiver there for Florida. They have always been a very talented roster. They were just seemingly held back by their head coach and quarterback through the first few weeks of the season, but the defense clamped things down as well. Another difficult performance by Arch Manning, 2 more interceptions, and a poor completion percentage. He was sacked 6 times. Florida's defensive line really controlled this game and held Texas to less than 2 yards per carry. Big win for the Gators and a lot of questions for Texas as they head into the Red River rivalry this weekend against Oklahoma. The other big game in the SEC at 3:30 was Alabama beating Vanderbilt 30-14. Despite the final score though, I was actually very impressed by Vanderbilt once again. This was by far their lowest offensive output of the season to this point, and that is to be expected going against a defense the caliber of Alabama. But they had their chances in this game. A couple of red zone mistakes by Vandy, which was uncharacteristic of them. They went 0 for 2 on 4th down, so that was another big reversal from last year's game. And Alabama really able to control the time of possession in this game. Ty Simpson continues to be my Heisman frontrunner for them, the quarterback. 340 yards through the air in this game, very quietly dominated this one. Did throw 1 interception, his first of the season. Still been incredibly efficient, and he throws the ball over the middle with as much zip as any quarterback in the country right now. Notre Dame's offense the past couple of weeks has really burst onto the scene to become one of the most explosive units in the nation, but this game against Boise State was actually won by their defense. Their secondary came into this game as one of the bottom 10 passing defenses in the country, but they got their best player back from injury in Leonard Moore. He picks off Maddox Madsen 2 times, and they pick him off 4 times as a team, holding Boise to just 7 points. So Notre Dame's showing that they can be good on both sides of the ball now. They are an extremely dangerous team, even at just 3-2. 2 really tough losses on the road at Miami, who could be the best team in the country right now, and by 1 point at Texas A&M because of a missed extra point. Notre Dame, I believe, will finish 10-2 and run the table the rest of the way, and they will likely be in the playoffs if they do so. Michigan State, Nebraska was one of the weirdest football games I have ever watched with my own 2 eyes. Somehow this game ended up 38-27 without the 2 teams combining for 500 total yards of offense. Michigan State was just 2 for 14 on 3rd down in this game and really unable to do much throughout on offense. But a lot of short fields, a lot of mistakes by both teams, a punt block by Nebraska, just a lot of really chaotic stuff happening in this game. Probably the biggest takeaway, though, is that Michigan State might have a quarterback controversy on their hands. It's kind of just been assumed that Aiden Childs will be the starter throughout the season, but after going just 9 of 23 for 85 yards and 2 interceptions, he was actually benched, and the backup came in and went 6 for 7 for 71 yards and a touchdown, along with a couple of very, very nice throws. So Michigan State, we'll see who they go with at quarterback against UCLA this weekend. Will be a game to keep your eye on for sure. Staying in the Big Ten, Maryland had a 20-0 fourth quarter lead against Washington. Their defense seemed to be in full control, but in that fourth quarter, they started to let Damon Williams get outside the pocket and run around quite a bit. He didn't really run for a ton of yards on the ground, but he made enough plays with his feet to get his receivers extra time to get open. And that was the difference in this game ultimately. Washington punches in touchdown drives 3 times in a row in the fourth quarter to win this one, 24-20. Really a gift of a win for Washington, who keeps their Big Ten hopes alive with this one. Maryland had a great chance to go to 5-0 and got a solid performance once again from their freshman quarterback Malik Washington, but had some trouble at the line of scrimmage, especially in the run game. They'll have another chance at home this week to get a big win against Nebraska. Another huge win for the Virginia Cavaliers as they move to 5-1 and 3-0 in the ACC with a win on the road at Louisville. They were nearly a touchdown underdog in this game, and it seemed like a really difficult turnaround after beating Florida State, one of their biggest wins in a decade. But they were able to make just enough plays to win this one on the road. Neither team really able to run very effectively, both under 3 yards per carry in this game, and Virginia only put up 237 total yards of offense, but capitalized off of a couple of key Louisville mistakes, and they win this one in overtime. Louisville made a bit of a comeback in the fourth quarter, down 10 to tie the game and send it to that extra period, but got held to a field goal before Virginia walked it off with a rushing touchdown. I was surprised that UVA was able to win this game outright despite not playing their best on offense. And if you look at their remaining schedule, it is very possible for them to run the table and finish 11-1, which would more than likely put them in the ACC title game. Everything in front of Virginia as far as any goals that they possibly could have had and beyond from the preseason. Moving now to the night slate. The biggest game of the day was a top 20 matchup, a rivalry game in the ACC, Miami traveling to Florida State. I loved this spot for Florida State. I thought coming off of the loss to Virginia, they would be refocused back at home. The first time Miami hitting the road all season, but they were not intimidated whatsoever. Florida State had the exact game plan that I expected from them. I thought they would bring extra bodies into the box to try and eliminate the excellent ground game for Miami, especially after Virginia was able to find so much success against them. That's exactly what they did, but Carson Beck, I had some questions about him being able to throw over the top. He answered all of those questions in this game. Only had to throw it 27 times, but 4 touchdown passes, 2 each to his pair of stud wide receivers, CJ Daniels and the true freshman Malachi Toney. Those 2 guys are going to be difficult for any secondary to match up against. And if Miami can maintain that offensive balance, they might be the best team in the country. So all the credit to Miami in this game. Florida State did lose the turnover battle 3-0, which obviously contributed a lot. They did outgain Miami in total yardage. They had double the total first downs, but the turnovers and the slow start allow Miami to win this game on the road. So huge credit to the Hurricanes. I still think Florida State is a decent team, but clearly not as good as everyone expected coming out of the Bama game. A couple of blowouts in the night slate that we don't need to spend too much time on, but got to give some credit to Texas A&M overcoming a slow start in this one. It took them a little while to figure out Mississippi State's defense, but this team continues to prove that they can win on both sides of the ball. They've already won a shootout in South Bend, and now their defense has dominated their first 2 SEC games. So 5-0 for Texas A&M. They are now a top 5 team in the AP poll. Most would just look at that and say, oh, it's A&M. They're always overrated. I disagree. I'm very high on this team and will be continuing to back them just as I did in this game. The other notable blowout featuring a ranked team was number 11 Texas Tech going on the road to Houston. I should have listened to my own words of advice on the podcast last week to stay away from Houston. This was a matchup of 4-0 teams, but Texas Tech was favored by nearly 2 touchdowns on the road, which does tell you a little bit about how the books view those 2 teams. Houston showed a lot of vulnerabilities in their games leading up to this one, and a lot of those persisted to this matchup. Part of the reason why the score was so bad was Houston quarterback Connor Wegman got knocked out of the game. The backup really struggled, although he did give him a little bit more of a dynamic element on the ground. But really, Texas Tech did not have to respect the pass throughout this game, and they did whatever they wanted on offense as well. 549 total yards, and it seems like the Red Raiders have put a bit of separation between them and the rest of the conference. 35-11 was the final here. Staying in the Big 12, a score that was definitely misleading. TCU wins by 2 touchdowns against Colorado. That was because they scored on the final play of regulation to blow this one open a little bit. The game was tied with about 6 minutes to go. TCU really struggled defensively in this game. I was not impressed. I thought that unit was much improved so far this season, but I think it may be slightly inflated by that North Carolina game in week 1. Still a concern that this team doesn't have enough balance around the rest of the roster besides Josh Hoover and his receivers, who obviously are excellent. But Colorado goes 9 of 14 on third down in this game, and a lot of balance behind quarterback Caden Salter. He was able to pick up a rushing touchdown in addition to a solid game through the air. Ohio State with another dominant defensive showing against Minnesota. The Gophers on their first drive go right down the field, 13 plays, 66 yards, but they settled for a field goal, and that was essentially the game right there. That's what every team has struggled to do, just punch it in the red zone against Ohio State. Minnesota goes 1 for 11 on third down, 0 for 1 on fourth down, only puts up 162 total yards of offense. So clearly they were outmatched offensively in this game. Ohio State runs away with this one 42-3. Julian Sayin easily with his best performance to this point, going 23 of 27 for 326 and 3 touchdowns. I still wonder if Ohio State can consistently stretch the field offensively, but he looked solid Saturday night, and Minnesota is now 0-2 with 2 rough offensive displays on the road so far this year. An impressive late-night ACC result for Duke, having to travel all the way across the country to play Cal. They did not look like that bothered them whatsoever, though. Won this game 45-21. And we're starting to see the Duke team that I was expecting to in the preseason. They've finally found some balance on offense to go with their quarterback, Darian Mensah. He's putting up fantastic numbers so far this year. He's over 1,800 pass yards with 15 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. But the freshman running back, Nate Shepard, has really burst onto the scene to give them, once again, some balance offensively. The defense shut Cal out in the second half as well, and another 4 interceptions combined by their 2 quarterbacks, 3 for Sangapolutelli, the freshman, and then 1 on his only pass attempt by Ohio State transfer Devin Brown. So, going to be some bumps in the road for Sangapolutelli, no doubt, but he obviously is a very talented player. He's just going through the first season in the ACC of his career. I expect next year he'll be one of the Heisman frontrunners. Cal is a really difficult team to gauge right now because it seems like their range of results is very wide. They could beat some good teams on their good days, and they could also get shut out 34-0 by San Diego State. So really probably going to be staying away from their games moving forward as far as betting, but an entertaining team nonetheless. Couple of notable G5 results I just want to mention real quick before we preview some Week 7 lines and matchups. Memphis with another blowout win. They appear to be the front runner in the group of 5 at the moment. 45-7, they decimate Tulsa, even with Brendan Lewis throwing 2 interceptions. Still were able to dominate this game from start to finish. And I have to mention Oregon State. Very sad what's happened to this program. Them and Washington State as the 2 teams remaining in the Pac-12. They are gaining some new teams next year, but really it just feels like Mountain West Part 1 and Part 2. Oregon State drops to 0-6 now after a road loss to Appalachian State. They'll be a short underdog when they face Wake Forest at home this week. A lot of crazy travel for this team back and forth across the country. Now, without further ado, let's look ahead to Week 7, where we've got some interesting matchups. I'm going to do a little less predicting today because I've found that I just need to take in some more information as the week goes on before we lock things in on Saturday, and I don't want this preview to influence the way that I pick on Saturday as much, so just going to go over some of the most important matchups of the weekend and some lines that are sticking out to me. First, we've got a couple of huge games in the American Conference title race, one on Thursday and one on Friday. Tulane is about a 6.5 point favorite right now against East Carolina, a team that their only 2 losses are to Power 4 conference teams in NC State and BYU. They've looked extremely impressive in their other 3 matchups outscoring those three teams 112-9. So let's see what they can do on the road here against a Tulane team that has really struggled defensively, but will be coming into this game off of a bye and has a very explosive offense. The other big game to note is on Friday night, where number 24 South Florida travels to Denton, Texas to take on the Mean Green of UNT. I've been very high on this North Texas team from the preseason, and I will likely be on them again in this spot. I know South Florida's played the more difficult schedule so far, but North Texas has been absolutely dominant at home. I believe their defense is better than what they've shown in the two road games, as they've only given up 32 points in 3 games at home. That game is currently about a pick'em. South Florida favored by 1 point, but that will be a hotly contested game on Friday night. Moving over to Saturday, we have a trio of SEC games that are really sticking out to me. I'll go through them one by one. The first one is early in the day. I kind of wish this was a night game, but regardless, this is a great spot for Missouri, as only a 3-point underdog at the time of speaking to Alabama. This will be their biggest home opportunity in quite some time, and I still think Missouri is underrated as a team. Their defense has been excellent, especially against the pass. The pass rush is electric, and they have arguably the best running back in the nation in Ahmad Hardy, certainly one of the top 3. Alabama has struggled to run the ball on their side, but they also have the Heisman favorite, in my opinion, in Ty Simpson. So this should be a phenomenal high-level game. I give the edge to the slept-on home team. The second big matchup is the Red River Shootout. Texas favored as the unranked team now after the loss to Florida. They dropped fully out of the AP Top 25, but they are still a 3 to 3.5 point favorite against number 6 Oklahoma. This is largely due to the fact that we don't know the status of Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer. He has been a massive part of their offense this year, and without him, they may struggle to move the ball against a very good Texas defense. They really haven't been able to create much of a run game this season, Oklahoma, and Texas certainly can run the ball even with their injuries at the running back position. So whoever can establish that ground game better should win this game. Extremely low total at 42.5. That's probably the thing that stands out to me most about this game. 2 potentially elite defenses going at it. The third and final, very tight spread on an SEC game this week is Georgia traveling to Auburn in what is one of the oldest rivalries in the sport. Auburn comes into this game off of a bye week, and the 2 previous weeks played in some very difficult environments on the road, back-to-back at Oklahoma and Texas A&M. They only lost both of those games by 1 possession each, but watching the game, it felt like they never really had a chance. I will say the thing that they struggled with most in both of those games is the pass rush for both OU and A&M. To this point of the season, Georgia has had very limited pass rush success. So if Auburn can give Jackson Arnold some more time to throw and they can commit fewer penalties, I think this is a great spot for them to win this game outright. There's still a lot of talent on this team, especially at wide receiver. Got to be able to get those guys the ball in space against a Georgia defense that has struggled to tackle at times this season. One game that is a top 20 matchup, technically, in the noon window is Ohio State traveling to Illinois. You guys have heard me talk time and again about how overrated I think this Illinois team is, and you're kind of seeing it with the spread of this game. They are the home team in this matchup, but they're a 15.5 point underdog. Obviously, Ohio State is the number 1 team in the country, but as much as people wanted to talk this game up as a possible upset spot in the preseason, I'm leaning much stronger towards Ohio State covering that spread than Illinois having a chance to win the game outright. As I alluded to earlier, we've got another interesting Big Ten matchup at noon with UCLA traveling across the country to face Michigan State in East Lansing, the first time that MSU will play a Big Ten home game this season after back-to-back road trips to USC and Nebraska. I thought they held their own in both of those games, although the defense certainly struggled, especially against the Trojans. UCLA will probably get a little bit too much love based on the Penn State result, but again, I have absolutely no idea what to make of this team. Now that Deshaun Foster is gone, it could free up some of the talented players on that team to play more loosely and possibly pull off another outright upset. This will be a very intriguing game that I'll certainly have my eye on. Probably the biggest game in the Big Ten, arguably this season, is Indiana traveling to Oregon. You could have said the same thing about Oregon's matchup with Penn State 2 weeks ago, but as much as that game did go to double overtime, it was a bit of a letdown. I actually see a very competitive result in this game for Indiana. I think it's still fresh in people's minds from a year ago that they struggled against the better teams on their schedule and really only made it to the college football playoff playing a lot of easier opponents and racking up some wins. But if you look at their schedule this season, it gets more impressive the more you dive into it. The win against Old Dominion in week 1 continues to look great. ODU is 4-1, and that's their only loss. Even the win against Kennesaw State in week 2 is not looking too bad. That's a Conference USA team that is competing well in their conference. And obviously the win against Illinois after the Illini were able to take care of both USC and Purdue. That boosts Illinois' resume even more. Oregon's win over Penn State now doesn't look quite as good based on the Nittany Lions result against UCLA. Both of these teams should be fresh coming in off of a bye, so I think we'll get a very competitive and very entertaining game in this one. A couple of other lines that are just standing out to me purely as a bettor. First, we have to go to the Big 12, where TCU goes to Kansas State. It's been moving back and forth a little bit. Last night, Kansas State actually flipped to a slight favorite for a second. It looks like they're back to being about a 1.5 point underdog. But a couple of weeks ago, this line would have been much bigger for TCU. As I said with the recap, I think we're starting to see some red flags with that TCU defense, and Kansas State looks like a much improved offense with their starting running back healthy. I am starting to lean towards Kansas State turning their season around and ending a little bit better than they started. TCU, I'm starting to downgrade a little bit, so very interesting line to me, and it seems to be lining up with some of the trends that I'm seeing with my own eyes. Another tricky line in the Big 12 is Iowa State, only a 3.5 point favorite now as we speak at Colorado. It was 4.5 24 hours ago. As I said, Colorado was pretty effective at moving the football even the last couple of weeks, and Iowa State now in a back-to-back road spot after a tough loss at Cincinnati. There's no doubt to me that Iowa State's the better team, but certainly could be a tricky spot for them. There's also one in the Big Ten. This one is probably going to be a classic Big Ten West matchup between Iowa and Wisconsin. Iowa goes in as about a 3.5 point favorite, and I'm leaning pretty strong towards the home dog. This should be a very low-scoring game with a total at 37.5. But as I said, I was impressed with Wisconsin at the line of scrimmage, and I think they can hold their own defensively. We'll see if Iowa can score enough points to extend the margin and cover a spread as a favorite on the road. And then a couple of surprising lines in the late night for the Big 12, both involving Arizona schools. First, the Wildcats host number 18 BYU, and they are just a 2.5 point underdog. I think the line tells you everything that you should know, and that is this is going to be a highly competitive game. These are two teams that I always thought were a little bit underrated coming into the preseason. BYU now being at 18 says they're not really underrated anymore, but I think Arizona still is. Should be a very fun and entertaining matchup between these two teams. Arizona State is the other major Arizona school, and they are a 5.5 point underdog traveling to Utah. This will be a 10:15 Eastern kickoff, so this will be a bit of a nightcap for those of us who spend way too much time watching college football every Saturday. I was surprised to see Arizona State open as such an underdog, 5.5 points in this one for as well as their defense is playing. I personally think that's a little bit too much. but I know people love to bet on home favorites against ranked teams. So that will be one that we'll certainly have to dig into more before Saturday morning. Another great matchup in the Big 12. All right, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Very much appreciate everyone who has been tuning in to these podcasts. We drop them every week, and we put a lot of effort and research into everything that we put out. So thank you once again. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe to this podcast. If you can, share it with a friend or someone in your family who might enjoy it. If you want more thorough breakdowns of the entire Week 7 slate, we go live on Twitter Spaces at 10 a.m. Eastern Time every Saturday, so be sure to check us out over there. But until then, hope everyone has a great rest of your day.